Typically, I tell these two events separately, but they took place so closely together, and they're so similar, that I might as well share them as one long story. The side effect is that by the end of it, you'll probably think it sounds pretty far-fetched. But I assure you, everything you're about to hear actually happened to me. So I might as well start from the very beginning. It was the fall of 2003, probably around September. I was a high school senior at the time, and I didn't have my driver's license yet. I don't remember what sparked it, but my best friend Mark and I were on an urban exploration kick. We'd been checking out abandoned houses and barns and places like that. There was even a place down the street from our school called the Underground Gas Station. It wasn't actually underground. It was a 70s concept design hidden from the road by trees instead of a big sign. It was pretty cool, but by then it had already been turned into townhouses. We had gotten bored of the obvious stuff. We needed a better target. Somehow, I came across this place called Little People Village. I think I found it on one of those early urban legend or creepy location sites, the same kind that talk about places like Dudleytown and abandoned asylums. You can still find pictures of it online today, and that asylum detail does come into play later. The legend behind Little People Village was that some eccentric artisan built a tiny, intricate stone village in the woods. It featured an ominous stone throne that felt completely out of place, like the builder ruled over the little people. According to the legend, whoever sat on the throne would be cursed and die 7 years later. Descriptions of the exact location were absolute trash. They were vague and contradictory, and inconsistent across multiple sources. We had a lot of ground to cover and locations to scout. Eventually, we did find the village, several miles from where we started. It was hidden away near a highway exit and some high-voltage power lines. At some point, it had been a roadside attraction, but when the interstate went in, the trolley line died. Early in our search for the village, we came across an abandoned nursing home or hospice care complex. It had several unconnected buildings, but the main one was shaped like a T, with a central hub on the ground floor. It was 2 floors plus a basement. Each side wing had its own stairwell, and in the center there was an elevator that no longer functioned. We found our way inside through a busted window on the side of the basement. We dropped in through the window into this huge open space that had a piano, a stage, and creepy murals on the walls. There was more than enough evidence of prior visitors, like spray paint and smashed things. We explored every inch of that place, and we ended up going back several times. We grew to know the nooks, crannies, and hiding spots. There was even a room upstairs that looked like it was covered in dried blood. During one of our visits, Mark and I were in the central hub on the ground floor. On that day, we had brought with us our realistic-looking BB guns and were shooting random junk left behind from the cleanout. We'd been hanging out there for about 40 minutes, when suddenly, directly above us, we heard heavy footsteps charging down the left side wing. It sounded like somebody massive in huge, heavy work boots. Mark ran toward the stairwell where the noise came from. I ran to the opposite stairwell to cut them off in case they doubled back. Those footsteps never reached either stairwell, so we made a plan. Mark started clearing rooms from his end while I stayed in the corridor, and we alternated back and forth. But there was nobody there. We checked the entire building. The only place we didn't see thoroughly was the ceiling, but there was no way it could have supported even someone of average size. We searched hard for about 45 minutes before we decided to leave. It was starting to get dark. As we walked back towards Mark's truck, parked way off in the corner of the lot, we both froze at the same time, with the unmistakable feeling of being watched. Without saying a word, we slowly turned around. In the second floor corner window, near the stairs, was a disembodied head, staring at us. Emaciated, gray. We couldn't see any torso or hands. We left, and never had another encounter there. The next thing happened a few weeks after that. The place was called Undercliff Sanitarium. This one was tucked about a half-mile down a service road in the woods, connected to a busy overpass near our local mall. Rest in peace to that mall. And it backed up to a state park. I think it shut down sometime in the 90s and was demolished in the late 2010s. It treated children with tuberculosis, troubled youth, and some mental patients. I found an aerial photo on an Urbex forum showing security cameras and the building layouts. The first time we went by, I was driving through with friends. We were surrounded by 3 squad cars in under a minute, who threatened us with trespassing charges if we didn't leave immediately. They did not mess around. Mark and I went back one afternoon. I figured that the safest route in would be to loop around the back. We parked behind a small building in a concrete courtyard, away from most surveillance. We locked the doors, windows, tailgate, toolbox, and hood. The car was a 90s Ford Ranger, and everything was manual. We walked around the building for maybe 2 minutes, tops. When we rounded the corner, the truck was completely open. Every door, all windows, the tailgate, toolbox, hood, glove box, even the center console. We weren't robbed, and it wasn't the cops. We were a quarter mile into the woods, and there hadn't been enough time for someone to do that. We got out of there immediately. Back home, I went online and read some stories about Undercliff, and apparently, in the 1930s, one patient was stabbed to death by another in that very courtyard. So yeah, 2 paranormal encounters in a short period of time might sound outlandish. A man's word on the internet doesn't mean much, I know. But all I can say is the stories are true. I never thought to research what this might be until I talked about it with my wife today. After reading accounts of very similar experiences, I was brought to actual tears. I have told these stories throughout my life and never forgotten them. I believe that growing up, we had a mimic. It presented itself several times in our house over many years, and then stopped entirely after the final incident. When I was very young, probably around 6. I woke up late one night and saw my mom walk past my bedroom door. At the time, my parents' bedroom and mine were right next to each other, with a bathroom across the hall. I called out to her, and that's when it arched its back and contorted in a way I can only describe as cat-like. Unnatural. I pulled my head under the covers, and when I looked again, she was gone. A few years later, in middle school, I was downstairs alone when the power went out in the middle of the day. The house was a bit older and had drop ceilings in the basement, so you could usually tell where everyone was in the house by the sounds overhead. Seconds after the power cut out, I heard what sounded like very heavy boots stomping around upstairs. Thuds, dragging noises, rattling, as if furniture was being thrown around. The noises went on for a solid minute. When it finally stopped, I went upstairs, and nothing was out of place. The next encounter happened a few years later, near the end of high school. I had fallen asleep on the basement couch after staying up too late. I woke up and looked over the back of the couch and saw my dad sitting at the family computer. The lights were off, but he sat in the glow of the monitor. This was strange, as my dad was not a night owl. I called out to him, and the same thing happened as before. Without turning to look at me, it bristled, its posture shifting into something deeply hostile. I closed my eyes to steady myself and make sure I was actually awake. And when I looked again, it was gone. I went upstairs and stayed awake for quite a while afterward. The final encounter came when I was in college. I got home late one night and noticed that a section of the hallway near my bedroom was unnaturally cold, far colder than the rest of the house. I knew something was wrong, but I forced myself to stay rational. Shortly after I got into bed, I felt someone sit down on the edge of the mattress and a hand rest on my shoulder. My dad's voice, calm and familiar, said, "Hey, wake up." I shot upright, and no one was there. I don't know why I knew this, but that encounter felt final in a way I can't explain. I lived in that house full-time for a few more years and visited often after college, even moved back in for 6 months during a career change, and nothing ever happened again. I never told my parents. Hearing other people's experiences made me realize that I wasn't alone in this specific phenomenon. Even thinking about it now unsettles me. The way something can appear so frightening, yet speak so gently. When I was around 8, I was a crybaby. I was bullied a lot and did not handle it well. I was short, skinny, unpopular, and very easy to upset. I had maybe 2 friends, Neil and Sammy, and even they didn't really stand up for me. They've since apologized, and I don't hold it against them. Around the time of this story, I found out that I needed glasses. To me, this was my worst nightmare. My mom made me get them, and I promptly shoved them into a desk drawer and swore I never would wear them. Somehow, I convinced myself that if I stared out my bedroom window at night, studying rooftops, signs, and distant details, that I could train my eyes to improve. It made sense to me at the time. So every night, for about 10 minutes, I stared out the window. My bedroom was on the second floor, and I focused on houses and shops in the distance. After a few days, I noticed something horrifying. A ghostly head floating above a house 1 street over. Just a man's head and shoulders hovering above the roof. I wasn't exactly scared, but deeply unsettled. He was always there at night, floating above a shiny patch on the roof, and during the day, he vanished. One afternoon, my friend Neil came over. I nervously told him about the floating ghost. Instead of laughing, he asked me to show him which house. I pointed it out and described the figure. Brown hair, mustard-colored sweater. Neil said that sounded like the man who lived there, and said that he hadn't seen him in weeks. That Friday night, Neil stayed over. Around 9, we looked out the window for the ghost. Neil went pale. Then he looked at me and said, "You need glasses." I told him that I had some but refused to wear them, and he told me to put them on. When I finally did, everything snapped into focus. The ghost that I saw was a reflection. The shiny patch was a skylight. The streetlight reflected a face upward into the glass in a way that made it appear to float. And to someone with poor vision, it looked spectral. Neil told his parents, and the police were called. The man died of a brain aneurysm, alone in his home. I had never seen a ghost. I had seen a dead man. So this was a ghost story that wasn't really a ghost story. But there is a final twist. A few weeks after the funeral, I looked out across the town at night again, wearing my glasses this time, and I saw something. A hazy shape floating above the skylight. He was hovering above the roof, looking directly at me, and even from that distance, I swear, he smiled and nodded. Then the streetlight went out, plunging everything into darkness. I've never told anybody about that part until now, but I know what happened. That wasn't a reflection. A lonely boy who had more in common with an overlooked man than anyone realized received one final thank you from someone who, by chance, I had finally seen.